All right. G'day. Welcome back to Collectivitis, the podcast where we dissect the disease that is collectivism. My name is Pietro. This is Max. How you doing, Max?
Good morning, Pietro. I'm pretty excited for today. Got a different angle of a guest, someone with a media background as opposed to a candidate. So, really looking forward to it.
Yeah, no, me too. I've been a little bit under the weather the last couple of days, which is to say that I'm really glad today that we do an online podcast, because if you guys could smell me, this is the last podcast that anyone would ever want to do with me. So I'm glad we do this thing online. So our guest today is the founder of the Discernible Media Studio, which is I'm sure many of our viewers are well aware of who he is, especially if they watch us. It's far more likely that they've been watching him for a few years, certainly. So we're super excited to have him on board. So without further ado, I'll welcome our guest for today, Matt Wong from Discernible. How you doing, Matt?
Pietro, Max, how are you? It's a pleasure to be here.
Thanks for coming on.
I feel honored to be here. I think there's not enough of this. You've said this in your podcast. There's not enough of this in Australia.
Are you trying to tell me that one of the 4 viewers of our podcast was Matt Wong from Discernible? Are you trying to tell me that that's pretty cool?
Listen, I had no idea that Curcio was making a regular joke trying to mention how many times he's been on our show, which is only once, I think.
So you don't understand how often he brings that up in conversation, like trying to make it sound natural. It's this reminds me of that time I was on Discernible with Matt Wong.
It's every time he mentions it, that's an extra episode he was on.
That's an extra invite he does not receive. There you go.
I really hope he watches this episode now.
He invited me to speak at his gala dinner he had a couple of weeks ago for his campaign, and he wants to send me a gift. And I told him he works in corporate finance and he needs to send me a new Tesla, and he won't come to the party. So come on, Anthony, you're supposed to be corrupt. I'm in the media. Anyway, he's going to fling me some sparkling water. I mean, come on.
Oh. Well, our next guest is Elon Musk, so we'll chat to him about that Tesla.
Yeah.
Matt, first off, you're as the host of Discernible, you're a true host. You're great at asking people's questions without pushing your own views, which is something we can admire. You're obviously quite liberty-minded, though. One thing we normally ask our guests is their journey into libertarianism, not necessarily claiming that you identify as libertarian, but I do believe you are quite liberty-minded. So it'd be interesting to hear your story of how you came to that, whether you just disillusioned with politics, like the big parties, and it funneled you in there, or is there another reason?
So, let me get a bit of background about your show. I know you're new, but most of your listeners or your target audience is liberty-minded, right? Or libertarians, yeah?
Yes, correct.
So what makes you think I'm You're correct, but what makes you think Discernible in the show is liberty-minded or adjacent?
Yeah. Well, watching your interviews, this is me asserting your point of view. I should claim.
Go ahead.
You allow people to bring their points of view, whether it's left, right, or super authoritarian, super libertarian, and you give them the rope. You allow them to bring their points out, and you're very neutral, but you can just tell. You can tell in the language, the body language. That
I also
you are quite
dare say
liberty-minded.
The people you have on give away your views more than you might like to admit.
Do you notice my body language when I recoil at some authoritarian guest and oh my God, that was crazy.
Definitely.
One interview that I really loved of yours was with the UAP candidate.
He was a good guy.
Nathan Scalioni.
Yeah.
No, and he seemed like a lovely guy, but some of the stuff he was saying was so patently and obviously wrong, and you were just letting him stew in it. And I have to wonder, did you get some enjoyment out of, as Max was saying, giving him the rope to kind of tie his own noose?
So, sorry, I'll answer your original question eventually, but no, with the enough rope thing, the Andrew Denton thing that I do it's definitely the case, but it's not designed to catch people. You'll see when we cut up people's interviews into segments, I'm trying to make their argument look as good as possible. I think straw manning is so easy to do. I mean, I do it all the time in my personal life. I'm trying to stop doing that as much as possible. When you strongman something, it gives you empathy for the other side, but more importantly, it strengthens your own argument.
Yeah.
So I try and strongman everything. So I've had people on the show that are, oh my goodness, the misanthropy, a hatred of humanity, we're cancer on the planet, is huge. But I'll still faithfully reproduce their views and publish it, put a good thumbnail, good music, nice cut, a little 2-minute clip of them. And so in terms of enough rope, like with Scaglione, he's not the worst that I've had on. He's just uninformed. But others who have absolutely crucified themselves on air, that's happened. I won't name them. They're more famous than Nathan. But I am, from a young childhood, I have a pathology. I want people to like me, as a lot of us do, right? Because I had an abusive childhood. And so you develop a hypersensitivity to people's body language and emotions, and when they start to feel uncomfortable. So that's what you'll see in my interviews. Whenever I ask a question that's a little bit more difficult, if they start to close up and recoil, I will back off immediately. And that's not because I don't want the answer. It's because I need to misdirect them. I need to make them feel good. I need to put in a joke. I need to give them a few more minutes, and then we'll loosen them up and we'll come back around to it. And we will eventually sneakily, gently ask again, and then we'll get their views. And I think that's really cool, because what you get to see is you get to see my guests with their reactions, their kind of unconscious covering reactions removed, and you get to see what's underneath. And you guys get to decide that view, that worldview, those value structures behind that politician or that influencer is horrific. I don't like them. Or that person is actually way better than I thought, and I like them, because we have uncovered it for you. And I believe that's our job. It's to uncover it for you.
Perfect. Yeah, that's it makes sense. It's, yeah, like I said, it's what a true host should be doing. If you can read the room and sort of adjust while interviewing, then yeah, you can't really do much better job than that, can you?
Yeah. Go ahead.
Sorry, to cycle back again to your views, which you do well, I don't know if it's even inadvertently give away. Like, for example, one of your recent episodes, and I can't remember the name of the guy, but you talk about anarcho-capitalism. Oh. Now, anyone who's talking about anarcho-capitalism in a positive light, I refuse to believe is not at least far along the way there towards the correct brand of libertarianism, as far as I'm concerned. So I think, that's kind of, I think, part of the reason we suspected your views lean towards libertarianism. But I'll let you answer that original question about your views.
Well, you can thank Michael Malice and others who fight very intelligently fight that culture war. There's no point. I mean, I struggled to write anarcho-capitalism on that thumbnail and on that interview, because I had to in the end, because that's the honest thing. But most of our audience is mums in the suburbs. And if you say anarchy or anarcho-capitalism, they just write you off. You're one of those crazy, even beyond the freedom movement, you're just nuts. And my mission is to reach those people in the middle, mainly because I was one, or still am one. But anyway, so Michael Malice and these sort of people got me into understanding what libertarianism is. In Australia specifically, of course, it was Leyenhelm, who only got in because he was first place on the ballot. Yeah. He himself admits that, says, look, we picked up so many votes by having the word liberal at the front of the ballot, number one. When he started to do that kind of libertarian stuff back in, when was that? Early, right? 2005, 10. What?
10, I think. He wasn't elected as early as 2005. I think it was
10.
It was later than that, maybe. Yeah.
Yeah, and he talked about this freedom stuff, and I was like, mate, this is really odd. It was, and so that started with my exposure to American libertarianism, and I learned a lot about it. But more, the modern libertarianism I find a bit cheap. I like the Rand Pauls and the Ron Pauls and those who go a bit deeper into the foundations of libertarianism and why liberty might be a more moral philosophy or worldview. And so even now, I don't really feel like a libertarian, though if I had to pick a party, most of my voting, I've been voting for the LDP in the last few elections, but I think it's shallow. I don't think people really understand what liberty is, what freedom is, and they miss bigger points like responsibility which we can talk about if you want. But I fear that by pushing the freedom movement and the libertarian cause without the underlying depth and structure, that you'll end up being cast eventually as what Clive Palmer has been cast: cheap freedom on a poster, UAP style, and it doesn't stick. Well, put it this way, it works during lockdown, but if you notice that the big lockdown pages and shows and channels, they start to wane because they didn't pivot. Like, a year and a half ago, I was saying to our staff, we've got to get off this lockdown stuff because this is not what we believe in. This is not what we're about. We're not an angry reactionary place. And so we started to interview vegans and whatever else. So, yeah.
I think it's quite interesting you said that modern libertarianism is quite cheap, because I would argue that I also, Rand Paul, Ron Paul, Michael Malice, Dave Smith's another one I'm a huge fan of. Like, this is what I would call libertarianism. So what do you mean when you say that modern libertarianism is quite cheap? Okay, yeah, UAP, but UAP wouldn't even refer to themselves as libertarians, I don't think. Who are you talking about when you mean that?
I'm not even talking about a specific person. I'm talking about the necessary marketing you have to do. So let's take good libertarians like David Limbrick from the LDP in Victoria, or David Leyonhjelm.
Yeah,
David Leyonhjelm is actually more purist. But anyway, in order to reach the crowd that we reach and that they're trying to target, the mums in the suburbs, the average Australian, they're necessarily having to simplify the message, and you have to, like, it's necessary. And you talk about freedom, and even I just interviewed Aidan McClendon from the Freedom Party in Victoria, and he's going very mainstream, jobs, health, basic sort of stuff. So he's having to dumb down libertarianism even more, even though his party name, the name of the party is the Freedom Party. And so that's what I mean by cheap, is I think we're selling a bill of goods that will ultimately not be able to deliver. Now, don't get me wrong. I would much rather the libertarians come in and take over, like it's the libertarian-minded people over what we have now in Australia. But I don't think they'll get there. I think if you look at what Daniel Andrews has done in this state that we're in, or in Queensland with Palaszczuk, she's so entrenched. And a lot of that is the fault of Campbell Newman. But the point being, there's such an cultural entrenchment towards collectivism in this country, which your show's all about. Yeah. To just come along and say freedom is better, and here's why, I'm not sure that's going to win at the end of the day. I still need LDP to be there. Like, I still want them to be there saying freedom and have a couple of freedom candidates in the parliament to balance things out, of course. But who is going to take the charge and attack the core cultural appetite for freedom in the community? Who's going to do that?
Yeah. Well, I think you're right. And I mean, that's in our own humble way, that's the whole reason we exist, right? Is I think that we've come across this philosophy, which is not only beautiful and moral and answers so many of the questions of the things that are wrong with the world right now. And, but as you say, the way that it's sold is in the most basic, like dumbed down, palatable way for the broader masses. How do we translate that philosophy and the things that we believe into something that is understandable by other people without going into the whole like the broader questions that we answer, like non-aggression and personal responsibility and all these things, which, I mean, there isn't an appetite for. You kind of you can sell just the word freedom far more easily than you can sell the whole rest of the philosophy. And I think that's part of the problem, why it's so hard to breach that cultural psyche, which I guess is kind of what you try to do as well.
Well, what is freedom? Like, we're all saying freedom, but what do we mean by that? Do we mean just no limits, or fewer limits? Is that what we mean?
I'd say fewer limits.
But what's after that? Like, fewer limits is great. I agree. We have too many bureaucracies and red tape in this country. But once you get those fewer limits, then what? You just get more people hurting themselves, more people failing at business, less government safety nets, and then the inevitable reaction. So what is freedom if it's just fewer limits? I think we're actually selling the wrong thing. I think we should be, what's Jordan Peterson saying, make your bed, I believe, does more for the libertarian cause than good friend David Limbrick standing up saying freedom.
Yeah.
Because that's the bedrock of freedom, is responsibility.
That's kind of part of what Australians and the rest of the world as well. The US has a bit of a better culture of libertarianism than we do, but it's this kind of assumption that, as you say, like the responsibility that we should all be taking on any endeavor that we undertake, like say, be it a business or be it a choice or be it whatever we do. Here, there is this kind of underlying notion that the government should be in charge of fixing it, that the government should do something about it, that the government is the arbiter of this responsibility when push comes to shove it. And this is something that is really, really deeply entrenched in Australians for some reason. I'm not sure exactly why, but that is so hard to shake. And I mean, you're right, the make your bed or take any level of personal responsibility is very much a first step that needs to happen before we can approach breaching this message to anyone.
So when you say in the US, you're not sure where it comes from, well, let's talk about that, right? So when small story about Jonestown and Plymouth. So the first colony was Jonestown in really early, was it 1706? Yeah. And then 1720 was Plymouth up north further. So Jonestown, Virginia, small colony, separated by thousands of miles, I think, hundreds of miles. And they both people from Europe, from Britain, coming to make a new life in this wild, rough place, the Americas, right? They both suffered some very severe conditions as they arrived. And so one of the solutions that both the colonies separately did was, let's pool together a common storehouse. So let's collectivize and let's put all the resources there and let's dole it out to people as they need it. What's that stupid Chinese saying? The collectivist saying, to each according to their need and from each according to their ability. Yeah, shove that up your ass. All right. So they did that, and they very quickly found that the resource level got worse. A lot of people got sick, starvation ensued, and so they couldn't continue this collectivist approach. So what they both did separately, these two colonies, was they said, you know what? We just don't have the resources to look after you. So from now on, it's every man creates his own way. Go out there, look after yourself. And from there, they still had ups and downs, but from there, we had prosperity coming into the United States. And that is the base culture of the United States, which is why you have the pursuit of happiness written into the very fabric of their country, not the right to happiness or the result, the outcome, the pursuit. And even so far as 1969, one of their presidents said that freedom and responsibility don't go together. Freedom is responsibility, because freedom is taking part in the shaping of your own destiny. And when he said taking part in the shaping of your own destiny, he's still acknowledging that there are governments and there are other forces, but you need to take part in it. But second, most important, is shaping, not fixing, not achieving, not rewarding, not outcome, shaping. You get to choose how your destiny turns out. So I tell stories to kids, like my kids. This is the best way to tell this concept, is through the story of the lion in the zoo, right? So if there's a zoo, there's Cecil the lion in the zoo. He gets fed every single day, but there's something wrong. Like he's sitting there, he feels there's something not right. And he looks out the bars and sees the wild outside and thinks he longs to be in the wild. So one day, Cecil the lion actually escapes out into the wild, and he's free. Yay, he's won. Freedom. This is what we're crying for. Freedom, freedom, freedom. But what happens if you let Australians out, or the lion gets out of the zoo? They get out into the wild and they discover, holy crap, not only am I free from the bars, I'm free to run, I'm free to eat whatever food I want, I'm also free to get sick with no help. I'm also free to starve. I'm also free to be lazy, sit on this rock like I used to in the zoo, but then I have no food. You're free to fail. And so when you think of freedom, I think it's a heavy burden, and I think it's a good burden. I'd prefer to be in the wild, but it's harder in the wild. And Australians have been neutered in the zoo, fed for so long, since about World War I and II onwards, escalated in the 70s through the throwing off of responsibility, that now they have almost no sense of responsibility. You cannot give them freedom because it's the same thing.
I think allowing people to fail, though, you learn and you get better, and then society as a whole evolves and grows stronger. So that's where I suppose I come in with, like, freedom and taking part in shaping your own. Was it taking part in shaping your own future?
Destiny. Fine.
Destiny. Sorry. Yeah. So that's where, like, going back a little bit to fewer limits. That's where I think that comes in quite well, because if you allow people to fail and learn, but as a government provide the guidelines and the help if needed, I think that is the way that, like, we should be angling for freedom anyway.
Yeah, you're correct. But the government has said for so long, we'll look after you, right? We'll be there to catch you, which is good, right? But we'll and even now, look at the election promises that Liberal and Labor are throwing around, even some of the smaller freedom-oriented parties. We will do this for you. We will do this for you. We will do this for you. You are slowly taming that lion and putting him into a zoo and feeding him, not realizing that you're also creating that's not a lion. That's a zoo attraction. It's
a house cat.
It's a house cat. Thank you. Yeah.
I think that there's sort of two thoughts that come to mind for me when we're talking about that. The first is that this seems like an inherent flaw with democracy, that if we centralize power this way, and at the end, whoever is, becomes the authority is through a popularity contest, of course, it's going to fall to the lowest common denominator of what can you do for me? It's very difficult to try and, sell personal responsibility when the other options are, I will give you free lunches, or I will give you this, or I will give you that, which is kind of like, well, we're playing the wrong game if we're trying to sell personal responsibility through this democratic process where all the incentives are skewed in the wrong direction. And the other thought that I was that came to my mind was, so we're talking about individual responsibilities being something that's been lost, and Australians don't value it. It's also something that's been carefully, neutered in the sense that, like, for example, the welfare state and all these things that the government pushes to take care of you and to look after you is taking the place of what historically would have been done by communities and families. And it's sort of destroying this really historically powerful institutions, or maybe not institutions is the word, like really historically powerful groups that would look after one another and were the way that humanity survived and flourished for hundreds of years. And it's been replaced by this like arbitrary lack of responsibility state that pretends to be this benevolent actor in people's lives. And I think, that to me is something that seems, I'm probably coming across as very black-pilled about all of this, because I'm not optimistic about the size of the state shrinking anytime soon. So if you want to give me some hope, Matt, I'd love to.
No, look, you're correct. Maybe we're all black-pilled, but the collapse in responsibility that we've seen, I think the most natural state for a lion is in the wild. I mean, you know it. You're libertarians. When you dare greatly and you fail, or you dare greatly and succeed, you feel alive. And so I think the more we can get people to taste that, we can actually push back on this. I don't think it's a lost cause, but we should explore that sense of nihilism that you've raised up in a way. So Nietzsche, right? Nietzsche said, "And God is dead," and people are like, "Yay, that's an atheist manifesto." No, actually, he said, "God is dead, and who shall we replace him with?" And then he goes on to talk about how humanity will ultimately end up in not a nihilistic structure, but a lion in the zoo structure, like in WALL-E. You know the characters in WALL-E, the humans who have never walked. Fat blobs.
Yeah,
sitting on the things being fed. That's the end of Nietzsche's prediction for humanity. Though he didn't want that, he thinks that's where we'll go. That is, I think, what we're facing now potentially is going that way. And if we can wake up enough people to come alive again, I think we might be able to push back against it. But selling freedom, I don't think does it. But I think getting, like I said, what Jordan Peterson is doing, or anyone. So we had this rapper guy called Zuby on the thing on our podcast, and he's always talking about working out. And it's true. Like, just challenge yourself. That's something I do in this very room. I was doing it before I came on here in my underwear. Is push your body, be what you were born to be. Eat well, figure out what that is for you, exercise, lift heavy stuff, go and challenge yourself, start an online business, like do stuff, and you'll come alive instead of looking for handouts. And so I think we should be selling that rather than selling freedom. I think that would do more to help.
Well, that is freedom essentially, as we were touching into that. So yeah, it's just the word, I suppose. It's been made to sound dirty, freedom, over the last couple of years. But essentially everything you just touched on is true freedom.
Well, are we allowed to talk about anything? Can I talk about the
Absolutely.
sexual revolution? Yeah. Sexual revolution in the 70s, contraception comes in, right? Big fan of contraception. I've got 2 kids. I don't want any more kids. So contraception is wonderful. Love it. Pro contraception. However, what happened when we brought in contraception? That we say it brought freedom, sexual freedom, because now you don't have the risk of, you have a much lower risk of pregnancy. I don't know if I see it that way, because now I have so many people, what are we now, 50 years later, who are devastated by this lifestyle of loose and free, it's sex, but not just sex, loose and free personal boundaries. So they get devastated by having so many partners, and they're just all over the shop. And then you meet some of these kooky, sometimes religious, but kooky people who, I've only ever had one partner, my wife, virgins when we got married. And they say that we're repressed and those people out there having one night stands are free. Now I'm in my late 30s. I talk to those people who are still doing it or used to do it. They say, no, that was not freedom. What you've got is freedom, Matt, because we struggle with lots of things. STD issues, my heart's been broken to a million different people and I don't really know where I am. I've spent so much time screwing around, literally. Now I'm, these are women. I'm 38, 39, and it's too late. It's too late for me now. There's no men available for me now. And I would argue that when we brought in contraception in the 70s, it wasn't just, you're freedom, sexually free. You're throwing off responsibility, because back in the day, you're like, I'm not going to sleep around with, even though I really, really want to, not because of a moral issue, because I might get pregnant, man. And if I get pregnant, I'm screwed. I'm 15. And so we threw off responsibility in the 70s in many areas, but that's one of them, which I think was under the guise of freedom, which really, I think, has ultimately become a bind for not all, but for some people now. I would say most people now who are living that lifestyle into their late 30s, wishing they had a family, are looking with envy on what I've got. And when I was in my 20s, it was the reverse. I was stuck in a marriage and they were free to go and have fun.
That kind of comes back to the point that I was making earlier. Is again, that's just like ignoring a traditional family structure or the things that we've done through history for thousands of years that have were done for very specific reasons. The family unit to look after the family and to look after their own and apart from the in case I get pregnant, I'm 15 thing, but remaining in some sort of solidarity between two people. This aspect of society has been very much destroyed, and partly because of the sexual revolution, and hand in hand with the fact that you can now go and be free, and it's going to be subsidized, and it's going to have that safety net from government, so that these family structures are the first thing that have been completely wiped out and completely destroyed and replaced by the ultimate family of we're all in this together, collectivism, etc., etc.
Well, those values are values that have been ingrained and evolved over thousands of years, like you said, and they're just being torn apart at breakneck speed now, which I don't really know what to attribute that to. Is it extreme governments? Is it the age of technology? Information just travels around at the speed of light. How do we stop it? How do we stop these values from being destroyed at the rate they're being destroyed?
Let's go to a modern example. Do you know Kayla Itsinas, Bikini Body Guide, the hot fitness person from Adelaide? Come on, boys.
No.
Come on, boys. Get your Instagrams out. So there's this, she's hundreds of millions of dollars now. Like, really famous. She's like the richest influencer in Australia. She's got a company called Sweat, and she built it with her boyfriend, Toby. Anyway, doesn't matter. She was her life is very public, right? And so she was living with her partner, Toby. And look, I'm on the libertarian side of things. I'm not here to judge anyone. Do whatever you want. I'm just trying to make a point here, and that is she represents the normalization of this culture that I'm about to describe. So she's thinking, she says to us all, followers, I want to get married to Toby. Then she gets pregnant, and she says, now I've got a bit of a toss-up. Do I have a wedding? Because she's a big influence. It's going to be a big wedding. Or do I have the baby? And she wanted to have the baby, but do I put the wedding off? And she said, ultimately, we have decided that we are going to put the wedding off to another year. We're already living together, right? And we're going to have the baby because we think that's more important. Everyone cheers. I'm over in the corner being the salty traditional view person saying, oh, they could be fine. There are plenty of people in loving families who never get married. Fine. But when I saw that, I went, you're literally, the way you're placing commitment with this guy is so low, just so flippantly. I said, this is not good for your relationship. I wonder if they'll stay together when the rocky times comes. Sure enough, she gets famous, they get famous, they're rich, blah, blah, blah. We discover they've had the baby. Now they're broken up and they've moved on to other partners, and they're probably very happy now. I don't know. But the point is that they chose to partake of the cake without putting the foundation and the solidity and the commitment around it. I think in her particular case, she treated marriage with like, oh, who cares? Marriage doesn't mean anything. In other words, we don't really need a stronger commitment than we already have. Well, clearly you do, because you broke up, girl. Okay. And had they made more of a commitment, whether that's marriage or something else, I think marriage is good, but some kind of thing together that would have built a bedrock for that child, there would have been a greater probability that that child is now being raised in a home with both parents. But now she's being shuttled on Instagram between the two families. And so I think that this has become normalized. And I think me coming out now and others like Zuby coming out and saying, hey, nuclear family structures and traditional values can actually be very freeing. I don't have to worry about STDs because I've never had another partner. I don't have to worry about seeing my ex who I slept with in the supermarket and being all awkward because there isn't any. So in a sense, I'm living in a freedom that other people don't have. So I think we need to normalize and make cool again what I'm espousing, and not just accept that what Kayla is espousing is the norm. And that's exactly what we're seeing with the government. So sorry to rant here, but back to Nietzsche. When he said, God is dead, who shall we replace him with? He's pointing to the fact that humans are naturally religious, but not just for religion. They're looking for not just the transcendent, but they're looking for something. We naturally went to collectivism, right? Daddy state, which is the nickname for Mark McGowan. You know, they call him Daddy State. Yeah, right?
Yeah.
We go to that because we naturally want that. And so when you remove religion, you've got a whole bunch of people now religiously supporting whatever it is, the Liberal Party, the Labor Party, COVID, lockdowns. We're all in this together. They're acting like the high priests of COVID because that's what humans are at our core, religious. So when you throw off religion and say, I'm an enlightened atheist, I bet I can find areas of your life that you're still quite religious in.
Yeah, that's one of the absolute cruxes of if you've ever been on like a university campus or whatever, and humans are hardwired toward devotion, and the first thing you realize of anyone who is, you know, completely free of this, historical trait of religion is that they are actually devoted to the state or that's what they've replaced the God with. And let's, even putting aside the discussion of religion and which religion and whatever, and whether religion is even true, which of these two things is more harmful? A devotion to traditional values and faithfulness and, community and looking after your fellow man, or adherence to the state. One of these is far more harmful than the other. So, I mean, like, even on a purely like utilitarian point of view, would you, given that we are going to worship something, it's hardwired into humans and always has been, and is true of all humans. I'm generalizing here, but the vast majority of humans, even in modern day, which is the one you'd rather have devotion to,
Well, hey, throughout COVID, right, you've seen, in my opinion, the people who most didn't lose their minds to collectivism were those with a deontological ethic, the opposite of utilitarianism. Those who have a sense of duty. So, for example, a deontological ethic would say, should I kill my 6-year-old daughter to save, should I kill that stranger to save my 6-year-old daughter? Utilitarian might say, well, it's my daughter. I value her more highly. Make a trade-off. A deontological ethic, say it's a Christian ethic or a Muslim ethic or somewhere that values life as sacred. You say it's never wrong to kill. Never. Doesn't matter if it's saving my daughter or not.
It's never right to kill.
Yeah, it's never right to kill. Sorry. It's never right to take a life, right? In a deontological ethic, in those particular deontological ethics. So regardless of it's the trolley problem all over again, regardless of the utility of my choice and the result, I'm still going to do what is right. Now in COVID, the most crazy deontological people, so the most hard out Christians, the most hard out Sikhs, the most hard out Jews, the most hard out Muslims, weren't many of them, but the most hard out ones, they still met. They still refused to do the dodgy because they said, the Jews said, I don't answer to you, I answer to God. And so we're still going to do what we believe is right beyond what the state say. And so there's been a collapse in deontological ethic since sort of the 70s as well. And I would like to see us just acknowledge that those crazy people who are like so sure about something, they're not actually crazy. You're crazy too. You stand up and say, we're all in this together. You say, those stupid government lines, let's all, I don't even want to repeat them, but the stupid gaslighting lines are just as crazy, but you're doing it to a government. And I tell you what a government is. A government is, if a government was composed, if all men were angels, right, then we wouldn't need a government. And if they're not, then we should greatly fear any government composed of men who believe they are. And so government is not a good place to put your devotion. I like that you said devotion because that's better than religion. We're all devoted to something, but we have replaced our the recipient of our devotion. We've replaced religion and all that with government, and that is a very poor substitute.
Yeah, for sure. And you see that in all of the craziness of how quick they, people who were devoted to the government when push came to shove during the pandemic, and whether it be lockdowns or mandates or masks or whatever it was this like fervent, quasi-religious attack on anyone who went against the grain, and you were sowing the seeds of evil and of whatever it may be by going against my holy government, my holy state, and what they're saying, which is true and good and right. It was very obvious how deeply ingrained into people's brains this was, that they like the positions that anyone who went against the hegemony of the state during the pandemic, they weren't unreasonable positions, and I'd say we've been vindicated in large part now in that we've been proven right about many of these things. But even at the time, it didn't stand to reason that we should be so attacked and so vitriolically ostracized, and yet we were. And that is case in point for how I suppose deeply ingrained that religious aspect of the state was in people's minds.
Kerry Chant, she was this chief health officer of New South Wales. She says, when you go to the supermarket, we all want to be friendly, but now is not the time. So don't be friendly. Don't strike up a conversation. I would argue that's deontologically never correct. That's ethically never right to encourage people to be mean or to not be kind. Let's go to a more serious issue. A Canadian one, there was, you had to separate when you get COVID. This is a real case. not satire. I love satire. This is not satire. This is a parent who was advised by one of the, I think it was one of the counties, one of the provinces in Canada, the government advised them that if your child tests positive for COVID, you need to isolate them from the rest of the family by putting them in a separate room in the house. We all kicked up a stink about this. We all posted about it, said this is evil. A bunch of Canadians as well. But there was one lady who followed that advice, and she was posting on social media about how much she was struggling with her child 7 or something like this, who was crying constantly because for 7 days she had her isolated in the house on the other side of a door with the bathroom in there and wouldn't allow the child or anyone to cross over except to pass food. That's child abuse. Yet her mind was so corrupted that she had no deontological ethic that said, hang on. The government is asking me with all of its authority and convincing words and proof and evidence. Still, it's asking me to do something deeply immoral. I will not lock my child in a bedroom for 7 days and pass food around the door. And when they're crying, just keep the door locked. She had no deontological ethic. And that is my fear, is that we've got a bunch of people running around now saying, like, good people. I love Professor Gigi Foster from UNSW in Sydney. She's a friend, love her, always have her on, but she's a very strong utilitarian. And I've challenged her on this. I've said, listen, that's great. You are correct. We did not do a cost benefit analysis for lockdowns and mandates and so on. However, what you're fighting for can easily be spun, because you must at some point appeal to people to say, you're in Nazi Germany. It is never right to just follow an evil order. You need to not pull that trigger and shoot that Jew in the head. It's never okay. And she's not arguing from that point. She's just arguing that, no, we should always follow best outcome for the most people, because she's an economist. And this just wasn't the best for the greatest good for the greatest number. And I think that's a dangerous position. That's literally what Hitler and other parts in history were, and CCP right now in China.
I think everything like you've touched on, like over the whole episode so far, it comes back to responsibility and people's morality, and these reactions just weren't justified. And I thought this would be a good point to pivot and talk about the Atlantic article, the Let's Declare a Pandemic Amnesty, while we're talking about COVID and the reaction and everything like that. So
let's just give a bit of background in case our viewers haven't heard of it, but it's called Let's Declare a Pandemic Amnesty. It's by Emily Oster, and it's essentially, she's a lefty, pro everything that the state did. And the article is about how we should now forget some of the horrible things that people said and did during the pandemic, because it was this crazy other time. So let's declare an amnesty about it. Now, in saying this, she doesn't admit to some of the worst things that they did. She still brushes over them or throws accusations and such. But broadly, the gist of the article is, let's forgive and forget and move on. And we'd love to hear your thoughts on this, Matt. She's
not asking us to forgive. She's asking us to forget.
Yes.
Skipping the forgive part. Yeah.
Well, she doesn't ask for forgiveness, which is part of the problem as well. She doesn't say sorry for all of these things that we did.
To be fair on Emily Oster, I'm not a fan, but the reaction to this article is not just because she's evil. No. People are reacting to the fact that, with the exception of, I think it was Sweden apologized that they didn't lock down hard enough for the elderly. They didn't lock down for anyone else. And I think there was another European country that apologized about getting the lockdowns wrong. But besides that, every government, every official, every bureaucrat, every Karen, no one is apologizing, and forget apologizing. No one's even admitting error. And so this reaction against this amnesty article in the Atlantic is because everywhere, the principal at my kids' school, everywhere, nobody is willing to face up to what they did. They're all saying, just let's move on.
No,
so that's where the
responsibility.
Oh, absolutely. That's where the backlash is coming from. Now, let's be clear what amnesty is. Amnesty is a pardon granted to someone who is convicted of a crime. If you're innocent, what do you need amnesty for, you idiot? There is no amnesty required because you are innocent. And so we have people like Emily claiming innocence. They don't literally say I am innocent, but you look at the arguments that they make, even throughout that article. They are effectively saying we didn't know as much as we know now. Therefore, you can't hold us responsible. Therefore, we're innocent. That's the implication. Then let's have an amnesty. They're not even logically following their argument properly. And amnesty is only for, look, I did this wrong, but we didn't know, so I need you to give me an amnesty because of something I did wrong. But she's not even admitting that. And neither are any of our governments. Neither is Daniel Andrews. Neither is Palaszczuk. Neither is Trudeau or Jacinda or McGowan. They're all tripling down and saying we did awesome. So this corruption of argument it really annoys me. That's why I'm going so hard at the moment on no amnesty, not because I'm angry. I didn't lose much. I had laptop class in this. I lost a business, but I eat, my rent is still paid. So I'm not actually very angry about the lockdown losses. It's just that so many people message me with their lives were destroyed, and that's very sad. But then to see the other part of humanity not acknowledge this other part that's messaging me with all these thousands of stories, like, no, that there can be no amnesty until one side says, hey, we did get this wrong. And then we can proceed from there. What we've got now is we've got the worst possible thing you can do. You've just abused a whole bunch of people. And it's not just the unvaccinated, right? A lot of my followers are vaccinated. There's a lot of what they call jabbed and jaded. A lot of people. Yeah. We did what you wanted. You didn't give us the freedom. We did. You said it was safe. Now I've got this issue with my face. You said that it would be okay, but now my daughter can't do gymnastics anymore, and she's only 16, and she's got a permanent heart condition. Like, this is the kind of jabbed and jaded people that follow me. They need to be acknowledged. You need to say, yeah, we got that wrong. And what they're doing instead is they're dividing them even more, saying, no, there's nothing to see here. We didn't do anything wrong. So I fear that we'll end up like America. The huge, divisive, polarized Ben Shapiro versus Young Turks kind of thing.
It's almost like with Emily Oster, it's like accepting guilt without actually accepting it. It's her admitting that she's guilty, not admitting that she's guilty, I'm sorry, but admitting that everything that was done was wrong, and let's just sweep it under the carpet, which is so wrong in relation to anything in life, but let alone some of the most draconian measures we've ever seen in my lifetime. There's one bit from the article I want to quote. It's the last paragraph, which is, the standard saying is those who forget history are doomed to repeat it, but dwelling on the mistakes of history can lead to a repetitive doom loop as well. Let's acknowledge that we made complicated choices in the face of deep uncertainty and then try to work together to build back and move forward. We tried to work together for 2 years, but if you questioned the narrative, you were shot down and told you were wrong and you were dangerous and you're going to kill everyone. You can't just try and forget history. And yeah, if they would have come to us 2 years ago and be like, okay, everyone's got different points of view how we should handle COVID and these draconian, not have draconian measures or have draconian measures, whatever. The fact that it was, if you question the narrative, you are evil. No, you don't get to choose that now. You don't get to come out and say, we won't repeat it, blah, blah, blah. It's just, it actually makes my blood boil. I'm slurring my words here because it's just...
You're just so angry, Max.
I know. I can't believe she said that. It's one of the few times we've got really fired up on this podcast. Let's acknowledge that we made complicated choices. We didn't have to make complicated choices.
Look, I agree with you, but even if we gave her that, okay, I'm not asking if you to grovel and pay me reparations. And although, a lot of the jabbed and jaded and injured and business losses would like that, and maybe that's whatever, but putting that aside, I'm not asking for that. The attitude is disgusting. I'm concerned about where this goes though, because in America, you've got a very different cultural backstops, not just the Second Amendment and the gun issue and Civil War and all this, but just the left-right divide over there makes sense. And I understand how you can find a tribe in half the population with Ben Shapiro or with that idiot from the Young Turks. Can't remember his name, the big guy, Cenk Uygur. Yeah. But in Australia, we don't have that, do we? We have a sleepy mass in the middle. And so you're either with the tinfoil hat or you're with Ali Langdon on Channel 9. That's it. So I do fear about if they continue to divide Australians, I'm not sure where we go because we have no history of standing up. And people say, oh, the Eureka Stockade. Yeah. I'm trying to navigate what we do at Discernible, but in life, like, have we just snapped something in society? Have we, because the quote is, success has many fathers, but failure is an orphan, right? So everyone now is just saying it wasn't me. It wasn't me. It's the Milgram experiment post. I would never have done that. It's Germany. I never sided with the Nazis. Like 99% of people say I never sided with the Nazis, and yet they had 99% approval rating. Same with the Iraq War. I was never for the Iraq War. Everyone says that now. Look at the polls at the time. Everyone was for the Iraq War. So I'm really worried about what's going to happen in Australia. Sorry, you asked for hope earlier in the
please
in the show. I've always just thought, listen, the world may be getting darker, but then that means the lights shine brighter. Any lights that you find, there may be few, and we try to be one at Discernable, and there are many others. I think you're creating one here with your show, which is great. Find those lights and hang around those lights, because even if it's a very dark night filled with zombies out there to suck your blood, it's a lot better to be around 3 or 4 other lights than out in the dark with thousands of zombies around you. So that's my hope, is find the lights.
Thousands of zombies out there to suck the blood. Are you talking about the unvaccinated?
Hey, you all need to follow COVID Parent. You know that Instagram and Twitter page?
Yeah.
Petrified COVID Parent.
Yeah.
Oh, so good.
I had a thought, which so you say that the hope that we see in coming, there is some hope, I think, that has come from the COVID and all of this, and I think you're right in that I see a lot of it more so in the US than I see it here. A lot of the divide there and the way that it has deepened, at least the right there now seems to be a more anti-state, anti-government, anti, this gross authoritarian control that they've been subjected to. Here, it's really odd because yes, there are some sort of like micro communities and minor groups and minor parties and stuff that have arisen from it, but largely maybe it's because of the whole sleepy masses thing, but we were subjected to some of the most authoritarian, lockdowns, everything, mandates, all the rest of it, and largely Australia as a population has just swallowed it. Yes. and doesn't even realize what we've given up and what we've surrendered and the precedent that we've set now. And that is, I see the hope more in the US than I see it in Australia in that sense. And I don't know, that's something that is in a sense I like it, because Australia does tend to follow the US, so hopefully that does have some repercussions here in the future. But I don't see a whole lot of hope coming out of the way that we've just swallowed all of this.
Hey, don't overlook the fact that a lot of the right wing in the US is the same sleeping majority. A lot of them would like Trump to come in. At this point, I'd love Trump to come back, but they would like Trump to come in and use the same authoritarian worldview and motive and just smash the left.
Yeah.
Which would probably be preferable than the left smashing the right, or the right smashing the left in that sense right now. But it's still the same thing.
Yeah, and it's not a solution.
This is why I hate I don't hate, but I have a real problem with a lot of the freedom movements in Australia. And people like, you're part of the freedom movement. I was like, there's a reason why they're not on my show. And there's a reason why the reason why I won't even say the names of some of them, because they're using the same fear tactics as the very people they claim to rail against. And they're using it to rile you up to create a new right wing. I'm not a fan.
Well, I think with that as well, like so many of them claim to be pro-choice, like for all aspects of life, but it's pro-choice. I want you to choose my way of thinking and my way only, which is the exact same as what we've seen from the government over not just the last few years, but a long time. But it's their way. Whereas pro-choice is a genuine pro-choice is allowing people to make their own decisions in all aspects of life. And if they disagree with you, cool. We like live side by side and we go our own ways, and society would just evolve. But yeah, so many of these people just want everybody to think the exact same way that they do, which, I mean, yeah, we all do, but it's not ethical.
Well, if you were to guess where we get most of our hate from, like 90% plus of it, where do you reckon it comes from? Is it
Media.
Labor MPs or media?
Mainstream media.
No? Media don't talk to us. They pretend we don't exist, which is the right move.
Oh, sorry. Where do you, as in Discernable, get most of your hate from?
Sorry.
Yes.
Yeah, no, I would have thought disgruntled people who don't watch the show but have seen snippets of the show and have been told to hate this.
Yeah, I thought that would be the case too. We don't. A lot of those people go, you know what? I don't like any of your videos at all, but I love that you're out there talking and I support your right to free speech. That's the kind of things we hear from those people. No, the hate we get is from the right wing, if you can call it that. It's from the pro-freedom crowd.
Is it because they assume that you're right wing and then you're not, and then they are just like, why aren't you right wing? Why don't you get more right wing guests on?
Yeah, well, maybe they assume that. They don't say that. They say things like, why aren't you pro-freedom enough?
Yeah.
Why aren't you pushing this issue? Why do you overlook this? I don't. I'm just busy, man. But I'm not freedom oriented enough for them. And like, you don't understand. I've done more for freedom than you screaming at nobody. You're screaming at nobody with your 16 followers, and I'm here. I've corrupted is the right word. I've corrupted so many thousands of people I know because they've messaged me who now are suspicious of government. And I'm like, yes,
yeah.
Right?
Well, it's the same as people who complain about like the election system and everything and claim it's all rigged, but then do nothing to actually step in and help and scrutineer or volunteer or anything. They just stand there and complain the system's broken. It's like, cool, okay, do something. Even if it is broken, like at least try. Standing back screaming at people will achieve nothing.
I think we need to laugh more. I think we need to mock more. I think this is part of the solution. I think Michael Malice and Jordan Peterson and the Babylon Bee and in Australia, the Barbecue Bulletin. We need a lot more of this because
you learn a lot from them. You actually learn a lot from them.
You do, but it's more powerful than yelling, screaming. People go, oh, I'm not listening. Listen, the lies are always told with a straight face. It's the truth that is told with a dismissive giggle. That's a quote from PG O'Rourke. That is what we need to do. And I think for me, to go back to your original question of the whole interview, my journey into libertarianism, if you want to call it that, has been education. That's how they're winning this war, is they're indoctrinating our children in a particular worldview. I'm not talking about trans stuff. I mean, that's pretty bad, but I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about in school. Do you remember when they're like, hey, eyes front, stop looking out the window? I'm like, I just saw a cool bird fly by. I just glanced at it like, oh my God. And they just teach you to think structurally, to be a good little automaton. So they teach you to, and now they're lowering kindergarten to 4 years old in New South Wales and Victoria. I'm like, this is not going to end well. So for me, it's been going against that, educating myself through, I love quotes, but also just reading what are ethics? Do I have ethics? Where do I get my ethics from? So I read, I investigated that. And then now I teach others about ethics. And I think that's the antidote to all of this, is the war on education and information. So yeah, educate.
I think every single guest we've had so far has like touched on the education system and indoctrination of kids. So Pietro, that's something we're definitely going to have to do, like a big full special.
Yeah, well, I was a high school teacher up until the mandates. So I definitely I refer not so much just to the eyes up front sort of really cookie cutter style of teaching that currently exists, but even in terms of the content and the curriculum as is designed at the moment, it is inherently completely statist. Like, yes, on every page, at every corner, on every turn, and even beyond just like, as you said, like the trans stuff and the woke stuff, which is absolutely rife, but there's this constant like undertone, underlying like truth of government good, state good, like you need necessary and completely wholesome and benevolent, and it's something that one isn't a given. It's not true for a lot of people to believe this thing, and two, in my view, is objectively false. Like this thing that is so inherently like integrated into the curriculum is actually objectively false. The state is not benevolent, and yet it's taught for 13 years compulsorily to every single person in the country and broadly the world. And that is something that's a victory that the state has. Then the state, keeps its grip so tight on this, because it's a victory that ensures its success intergenerationally, and that's frightening to me.
Do you know what they're doing? They're proselytizing. Back to what we're talking about, religion. They are literally proselytizing to kids and teaching the ways of the state. And when I tried to throw off the Christian upbringing, I tried to throw off the thinking, try to be not an atheist, but an enlightenment empirical thinker, right? And I tried to embrace that. And I found that you can't throw off, let's call it the propaganda of religion, just for a moment, right? You can't throw off the propaganda of a religion thinking that you'll live a life free of propaganda. You embrace the propaganda of the state, or you embrace the propaganda of the New Age movement, or you embrace the propaganda of the average Aussie way of life. We have our own myths and our own sayings and our own standards and social milieu. Basically, you need to choose your propaganda. And so I've gone back to say, holy cow, the Christian worldview, not everyone wants the Christian religion, that's fine. But the Christian worldview, things like liberty, the sanctity of humans, our new brand, Team Human, is exactly that, saying, no, humans are not just some stupid animal that you can kind of deal with like Hitler dealt with and Mao dealt with and China deals with currently. No, humans are inherently special, and they therefore have a responsibility to steward this earth. We should not be saying they're just like putting this misanthropic approach. So yes, choose your propaganda is what I'm saying nowadays.
I just want to note that Pietro, as a teacher, if kids were looking eyes forward directly at him with a whiteboard, he would tell them, stop looking at me, look outside at that cool fucking bird. No looking forward.
Stop looking at me. I don't want to be looked at. We are almost at the hour mark here. There is just one last question that it's a different topic altogether, but I've
got one really important question too, so you go first.
All right, well, two quick questions just before we finish. My question was, and I feel like we could talk to you for hours, Matt, so
I'm enjoying it. Thank you, boys.
So you're obviously rubbing shoulders with a lot of people involved in the Ian Cook campaign.
Yep.
It's very I want to believe Ian can win it, but it's very hard to know, because whenever you look at someone's campaign from the outside, everyone portrays this, we're about to win kind of mentality. How realistic do you think it is that Ian Cook might get above Dan Andrews? You're
not going to get an answer. We're not going to get what you want. I don't have any inside information for that. So Emily from Voice for Vic is the campaign manager, right? And Ian Cook says to me, and her and Ian Cook say, this has happened, this happened. And they said to me, they hate Dan and maybe we'll win it. I'm like, of course they said that to you.
Yeah.
They're coming up to you on the street. And then I talked to a Labor member nearby, I won't say his name, because we're trying to get him onto election coverage. He's anti, he got shafted by Daniel. So he's like, go the WorkSafe investigation into manslaughter. He's a legend. He's a sitting Labor MP. He got shafted, ex-minister. He
hasn't resigned yet.
Well, he'll be forced to at this election. Yeah. Dan screwed him.
Yeah.
But he's like, no, I see what you're saying. He hates Dan, but I see what you're saying, but I don't think he'll lose a seat. Then I talked to other pundits and on the Liberal side, and everyone's got their own reasoning. They say, oh, this is what I'm hearing on the ground. And it's always biased. So the Labor guy is saying, I'm hearing there's still a lot of reports. And of course you're hearing that. You're red-shirted Labor. So to answer your question, can Ian Cook get up? Look, I don't know. I hope so. Let's see what happens, hey? The ultimate outcome from this election, I think, most likely, just looking statistically, I mean, if Dan gets booted out, Liberals get in, that'll be interesting. But realistically, maybe the Labor gets back in. Maybe Labor gets in without Daniel. Something has to go wrong. Like they'll lose Daniel in his seat and they'll get back in. Or they'll get back in with Dan, but it'll be minority government with the Greens.
Oh, gross. That's gross. But I think it would be way more interesting if, yes, they got in without Dan. Because that would be that would be really like, what's the message here? Like, thanks people, you've spoken. What's the message? Like,
that's clear, yeah. Because if Labor gets out and Guy gets in, the Labor are just going to say, oh, it's time factor and all this. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, something less gross. The most important question of this whole interview, Matt. What's your favorite ice cream shop in Melbourne or Victoria?
How are you guys so deep into my content? You're pulling out so much of my personal.
What, you do interviews? I thought you were just an ice cream enthusiast.
Oh, I made some of my own last night, a couple of nights ago, because I found some cream for $1 a tin in Coles. Listen, the best is Anita's Gelato, which is a chain around the world. There's none in Melbourne.
Okay.
They're in Sydney, in Broadway, and then out east towards Paddington, Bondi, but they're just off the chain. But I've noticed people are coming out with these sugar-free flavors. Now you have to expose yourself to a bit of aspartame and friends, but sugar-free, nearly zero carbs. They have it at Gelatissimo in Melbourne, at Southland Shopping Centre, and in Fitzroy. And they only have a couple of flavors, but they're delicious. But you know what's been amazing? We did this night with Jay Bhattacharya like a month ago. And at midnight, we go out to the CBD. There's a crepe store on the eastern side of the CBD. I can't remember it, but they wrap a crepe around fruit salad and cream and ice cream. Like, can you imagine that combination? Oh.
And at midnight as well, it would just taste so much better.
Oh, so good. Ice cream's the best. Oh, one more plug. Donata. Do you know Donata?
No.
So in the Coles and Woolworths now, there's a brand called DENADA. You guys look pretty lean. You don't care about this, but I used to be very obese, right? So low carb is the name of the game. They have this very, very low carb ice cream. Anyway, they've just come up with these sticks like magnums, right? Everyone, you need to go and buy the It's a blue box. It's $12 for 3. There's the problem. It's $4 an ice cream, but bloody good. It's got very low carbs, 7 grams per 100 with this one. And it's a magnum with hazelnuts in it, and chocolate coating.
But all our viewers, which are so far my mum, Max's mum, and all of our other guests' mum, will be thrilled with those plugs, and they will definitely follow up on those, I reckon.
I'm gonna plug one ice cream shop. Now we don't have sponsors, but if they're listening and want to sponsor us, I'll continue to plug them. Caraton in Footscray.
Caraton.
Yeah, I forget his name. He's a very, very good chef. And I can't believe I've forgotten his name. But yeah, gourmet, weird ice creams. One I had was chicken skin with chili and waffles.
What the?
It was good. It was interesting.
Chicken skin.
Yeah.
So you boys are in regional. So do you travel in?
Yeah, get off the train at Footscray just to go to this ice cream shop on the way into the city.
If Tim Quilty gets Rexit up, I'd move.
Oh yeah, that would be awesome.
Yeah.
Cool. Discernible from Ballarat. How's that?
Secession is like the most libertarian thing we can hope for.
Look, ice cream is so good. Hey, I'm wondering if that's the real meaning of life, is just good food. I mean, there's such a what do you call it? Like a hormonal chemical intertwining humanity and food. I mean, not just ice cream, like a good steak. Oh
yeah. That might be a good point to wrap it up before we talk about food for an hour.
That seems like a natural conclusion. Well, we can talk about food in the post episode. So thank you so much for joining us, Matt. It's been an absolute pleasure. Subscribe to our viewers, subscribe to our YouTube, follow us on Instagram, and like us, follow us on Spotify, please. Anything else you wanted to add, Matt?
Okay. Sorry for being a little bit negative in this podcast, but I think we all needed to hear it. Hey, so Winston Churchill said that Americans will always do the right thing, but only after trying everything else first, right? Maybe that's the case in Australia. Maybe we just need to not forgive, I guess, but just be calm, everyone. This too shall pass, and maybe in the end, Australians would do the right thing after trying everything else first.
When does everything else end, though?
Before we die, because these cycles could be bigger than a lifetime, right?
Yeah, I know, right?
For sure.
Yeah. Good luck, everyone out there.
Thanks for watching, everyone. We'll catch you next time.